So I was talking to someone recently, a guy in his late 50s, sharp, active, takes good care of himself, and he said something that I hear constantly. He said, "I sleep fine. I just wake up 2-3 times a night to use the bathroom. That's just what happens when you get older, right?" And I told him what I'm going to tell you right now. No, it's not just what happens when you get older. That's the thing. Most people accept this as normal aging and never ask why. And because they never ask why, they never find out that there are actual, addressable reasons this is happening. Reasons that, when you understand them, point directly to things you can do something about. Waking up once during the night to urinate, doctors call it nocturia, that's on the borderline of normal, especially as we get older. Waking up 2, 3, 4 times, that is your body signaling something. It's worth paying attention to. So here's what we're going to cover. First, I'm going to walk you through what's actually happening physiologically, because once you understand the mechanism, everything else clicks. Then we're going to go through the main causes, because there are several and they're not all the same problem. Some are hormonal, some are about your bladder, some are about your heart, and yes, I said heart, we'll get to that. And then I'll give you a clear picture of what to actually do, what to ask your doctor, and what you can start addressing on your own. Okay, so let's start with the physiology, because most people have never had anyone explain this to them properly. In a healthy younger adult, your body runs on a pretty elegant schedule. During the day, your kidneys are busy, filtering blood, producing urine, managing your fluid balance, and then as evening comes, something shifts. Your brain starts releasing a hormone called vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone. And that hormone essentially tells your kidneys to slow down. Concentrate the urine you're making. Hang on to the water. Let the person sleep. Now here's what changes as we get older. That nighttime surge of vasopressin, it weakens. In some people over 60, it gets significantly blunted. In a portion of elderly adults, research has found the hormone is barely detectable at midnight at all. And when that signal fades, the kidneys don't get the memo to slow down. They keep producing urine at roughly the same rate they did during the day. So instead of making one small concentrated batch of urine overnight, your body is producing a full, dilute stream, and your bladder fills up and wakes you up 2-3 times a night. This is called nocturnal polyuria, and it's the most common underlying cause of nocturia in people over 60. Not a weak bladder, not just aging, a hormone signal that's lost its rhythm. And this is where it gets more serious than most people realize, because it's not only the vasopressin system that can drive this, there are several other mechanisms at work, and some of them point to things you absolutely need to know about. The one that surprises people most, and the one I always make a point of mentioning, is the connection to your heart. Stay with me here, because this is genuinely important. During the day, if your heart isn't pumping quite as efficiently as it should be, and this can be true even before anyone has officially diagnosed you with anything, fluid tends to pool in your legs. You might notice mild ankle swelling by late afternoon. Your socks leave an indent. You chalk it up to being on your feet. But here's what happens at night when you lie down. Gravity is no longer pulling that fluid down into your legs. It redistributes. It moves back into your bloodstream. Your blood volume increases. Your kidneys detect that shift, and they respond the way kidneys are supposed to, by filtering out the excess, which means a surge of urine production right around the time you're trying to sleep. This is why nocturia can be one of the earliest signs of cardiovascular stress, sometimes showing up before someone even knows they have a heart issue. It's not the most obvious symptom. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't look like anything. It just looks like getting up to pee at night, and that's exactly why it gets dismissed for years. Hypertension follows a similar pattern. Research has found that people with blood pressure that doesn't dip normally overnight, what doctors call non-dipping hypertension, have a significantly higher rate of nocturnal polyuria. The kidneys are working overtime to excrete sodium at night that they couldn't manage during the day, and the result, again, is more urine, more waking up. And then there's sleep apnea, which deserves its own section entirely, because the mechanism connecting it to nocturia is something most people have genuinely never heard. We'll get to that in detail, but the short version is, it's real, it's common, and it's massively underdiagnosed in this age group. The point I'm making, and I want this to land, is that waking up to pee multiple times a night is not one problem. It's a symptom that can be pointing to several different underlying issues. Some of them are hormonal and manageable. Some of them are cardiovascular and need to be on your doctor's radar. Getting up at 3 a.m. isn't just inconvenient. It's your body sending a message. The question is whether you're reading it. So now let's talk about the pieces you can actually address. So the first place to start, and this is where most people make a mistake right out of the gate, is fluid intake. Specifically, not just how much you're drinking, but when you're drinking it. The common advice is stop drinking fluids a couple hours before bed. And yes, that helps at the margins. But there's research showing it's actually not the most important piece of the timing puzzle. There was a study out of Japan published in the International Journal of Urology where they took 65 men with nocturia driven by overproduction of urine and guided them to reduce their overall daily fluid intake, not just their evening intake. 1 month later, 2/3 of them, 67%, experienced at least one fewer wake-up per night. And here's what's interesting about what the researchers found. The factor that best predicted improvement wasn't how much they cut back in the evening. It was how much they cut back during the day. Think about what that means. If you're drinking a lot of fluids through the afternoon, extra coffees, big glasses of water, juices, your kidneys are processing that load all day, and a portion of it is still being filtered into urine by the time you're trying to sleep. The tank doesn't empty the moment you stop drinking. There's a lag, and that lag is showing up at 2 a.m. So what does smarter fluid management actually look like? Aim to get the bulk of your fluids in earlier in the day, morning and early afternoon. Not a rigid cutoff, but a general front loading. By the time dinner comes around, you're tapering. After dinner, small sips only unless you're genuinely thirsty. Not dehydrated, just not topping up. And caffeine deserves its own mention here, because this is something people consistently underestimate. Caffeine is a diuretic. It makes your kidneys produce more urine. But beyond that, it also stimulates the bladder directly. It increases bladder urgency and irritability independent of how much fluid you're actually putting in. And caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours in most adults, which means a 3 p.m. coffee is still half active in your system at 8 or 9 p.m. For people over 50, the liver actually clears caffeine more slowly, so that half-life can stretch even longer. An afternoon coffee that felt totally fine in your 30s is now a different calculation. Alcohol works similarly. It suppresses that vasopressin hormone we talked about, the one that tells your kidneys to slow down overnight. So a glass of wine with dinner is giving your kidneys 2 signals at once. Here's extra fluid to process, and by the way, don't hold back on making urine tonight. It doesn't mean you can never have a drink. But if you're waking up 2 or 3 times a night, it's worth connecting those dots. Now, the second lever that most people haven't heard of, and this one genuinely surprises people, is leg elevation in the late afternoon. Stay with me here, because this connects directly back to what we covered in the physiology section. If your body tends to accumulate fluid in your lower legs during the day, and a lot of people over 50 do, you might notice mild puffiness or sock indentations by late afternoon. That fluid is going to redistribute when you lie down at night, and your kidneys are going to process it while you're sleeping. The way to get ahead of that is to trigger that redistribution before you go to bed, not while you're trying to sleep. Elevating your legs for 30 to 60 minutes in the late afternoon, feet above heart level, lying back on the couch or in a recliner, encourages that pooled fluid to return to circulation earlier in the evening. Your kidneys process it while you're still awake. By the time you actually get into bed, there's significantly less fluid waiting to be mobilized. It's not a dramatic intervention. It takes no equipment and no medication, but for people whose nocturia is driven by that fluid redistribution pattern, the heart and circulation piece we talked about, it can make a real, noticeable difference. And this connects to something worth flagging here. If you're consistently noticing significant ankle swelling by the end of the day, that's not just a cosmetic issue or something to brush off. That's a sign your circulation is working harder than it should. It warrants a conversation with your doctor, not to be alarmist, but because understanding why that fluid is pooling in the first place is important information. This is the part I really want you to pay attention to, because we've covered the lifestyle levers, the fluid timing, the caffeine, the leg elevation. Those are real, and they work. But for a significant number of people waking up 2, 3, 4 times a night, the problem isn't lifestyle at all. It's something sitting underneath that no amount of cutting back on evening tea is going to fix. Let's talk about sleep apnea first, because this one is massively underdiagnosed. Estimates suggest that the majority of people who have it haven't been tested, and its connection to nocturia is something most people have never heard. Here's what happens. When someone with obstructive sleep apnea stops breathing during the night, the airway closes off and the chest has to strain hard against that blockage trying to force air through. That effort creates a powerful negative pressure inside the chest cavity. And that mechanical strain stretches the walls of the heart. The heart senses this as a signal of fluid overload, like there's too much blood returning, and it releases a hormone in response. That hormone acts as a diuretic. Your kidneys get the signal, they ramp up urine production, and your bladder fills, and the cycle repeats over and over every time an apnea event occurs, which in moderate to severe sleep apnea can be dozens of times per hour. So you wake up. Not because your bladder happened to be full, but because your airway kept closing and your heart kept triggering a urine response all night. You get up, you go to the bathroom, you come back to bed, and you've never once connected it to your breathing. The research on this is clear. A systematic review and meta-analysis, combining data from 5 clinical trials, over 300 patients, found that treating sleep apnea with CPAP therapy produced a statistically significant reduction in both the number of nighttime bathroom trips and the volume of urine produced at night. Significant, not marginal. In some studies, over 40% of patients saw their nocturia reduce by at least 1 episode per night just from treating the breathing problem they didn't know they had. And this is where I want you to really sit with something for a moment. There are people, maybe people you know, maybe you, who have been waking up 3 times a night for 10 years, who've had enlarged prostate evaluations, who've cut back on fluids, who've tried every tip they've read online, and they're still getting up every night, dragging themselves to the bathroom, lying awake afterward, never quite getting the sleep their body needs, and they've never been tested for sleep apnea, not once. 10 years of fragmented sleep, of exhaustion that accumulates quietly, of a heart that's been under strain every single night while you were lying there thinking you were resting. That's not a minor inconvenience. That is a decade of your body working against itself in the dark. And nobody caught it because nocturia looked like a bladder problem, not a breathing problem. I've seen this. A person comes in exhausted, frustrated, resigned to just being a light sleeper who needs the bathroom a lot. We do a sleep study. Severe obstructive sleep apnea. CPAP goes on. Within weeks, sometimes less, the nighttime trips drop dramatically. The sleep quality improves. The daytime fatigue starts to lift. And they look at me and say some version of, "I had no idea. I thought that was just how I slept." That's why this matters, because the right diagnosis changes everything. And the wrong assumption that it's just age, just the prostate, just a small bladder, keeps people stuck. Now, the other hidden contributor I want to mention, because it trips people up constantly, is their own medication list. Beta blockers, very commonly prescribed for blood pressure and heart conditions, can disrupt the normal day-night rhythm of sodium excretion, pushing more of it to nighttime. Calcium channel blockers, also common for hypertension, can cause ankle swelling as a side effect, which feeds directly into that nighttime fluid redistribution pattern we covered earlier. Diuretics taken in the afternoon or evening are obvious culprits, but they're remarkably often overlooked because the person has been on them for years and stopped questioning them. Even some antidepressants affect bladder function. The point isn't that you should stop your medications. Absolutely not. Don't do that without talking to your doctor. The point is that if you're waking up multiple times a night, your medication list is a legitimate piece of the puzzle that deserves to be looked at. Timing adjustments alone, moving a diuretic from afternoon to morning, for example, can make a meaningful difference without changing anything else. So with all of that in mind, the lifestyle factors, the hidden causes, the things worth asking your doctor about, let's bring this together into a clear, simple picture of what to actually do. Okay, here's what to actually do in order of priority. First, track it for a week, just a few days even. Write down how many times you're getting up, roughly what time, and roughly how much you're drinking and when. Doctors call this a voiding diary, and it sounds more complicated than it is. You're just paying attention to a pattern you've probably been ignoring for years. That information is genuinely useful for you and for any doctor you talk to because it starts to reveal whether this looks more like a fluid volume issue, a timing issue, or something else entirely. You can't fix what you haven't observed. Second, make the lifestyle adjustments we talked about. Front load your fluids. Get the bulk of what you're drinking done by early afternoon. After dinner, small sips. Cut caffeine off by early afternoon. And I mean actually early, not 6 p.m. If you're having ankle swelling in the evenings, try 30 to 45 minutes of leg elevation before bed for a week and see what it does. These aren't dramatic changes. But done consistently, they shift the conditions enough that some people notice a real difference within days. Third, and this one I want you to take seriously, get screened for sleep apnea if you haven't, especially if you snore, especially if your partner has ever mentioned you stop breathing in your sleep, especially if you wake up tired even after a full night in bed. A sleep study used to mean an overnight in a lab, but home sleep testing is now widely available and much simpler. This is a test that can genuinely change your life if it comes back positive. Not because it's scary, but because it's fixable. And fixing it resolves not just the nocturia, but the exhaustion, the blood pressure strain, the cognitive fog that you may have quietly accepted as just getting older. Fourth, bring the full picture to your doctor. Not just, I'm waking up to pee a lot. That framing gets you a prostate conversation or a bladder referral, and those may be part of it. But walk in with your voiding diary. Mention the ankle swelling if it's there. Mention the sleep quality. Mention every medication you're on, and when you take it. You're giving them the full picture instead of just the surface symptom. A good doctor, given that information, can start to distinguish between the hormonal cause, the cardiovascular cause, the sleep disorder cause, and the bladder cause, because the approach to each one is different. Now here's what I want to leave you with. Waking up 2-3 times a night doesn't just make you tired the next day. Chronic sleep fragmentation accumulates. It affects mood, memory, immune function, cardiovascular health, metabolic health. The research on the long-term effects of disrupted sleep is unambiguous, and most people who've been dealing with nocturia for years have been absorbing that cost without realizing it. Not dramatically, just quietly, night after night. You don't have to accept that. That's the whole point of this video. The person who woke up this morning after 3 bathroom trips and thought, that's just how it is now, that doesn't have to be the story, because there are real, identifiable reasons this happens, and most of them have real, addressable solutions. Start with the diary, make the fluid shift, get the sleep study if it applies to you, and talk to your doctor with the full picture, not just the headline symptom. That's it. If this video gave you something useful, something you didn't know before, or a connection you hadn't made, hit subscribe. That's exactly what this channel exists to do. I'll see you in the next one.